Okay, so we start chapter 18, which speaks about the third stage of the dividing of the land between the tribes. Right? If you remember, the first stage was in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, when the two tribes and the half received their part in the other side of the Yarden. After that, we had another division, another split of the land after the 7 years of war. After the 7 years of war, it was divided only for Yehuda and Yosef, which Yosef is actually divided for 3 different places. We have Ephraim and 2 parts of Menashe. So 4 parts of the land, additional 4 parts of the land were already divided. And then we left with 7 tribes and a half. 7 tribes and a half. And the Chalukah, the division of the land between these 7 tribes and a half, happened after another 7 years, meaning after 14 years from the entrance to the land of Israel. Only then the other parts of the land was divided between the 7 tribes and a half. And not and a half, 7 tribes, excuse me, 7 tribes. So the question is, why is there another division? Why didn't everything happen in the same time? I understand the difference between the times of Moshe, but why in the times of Yehoshua, in the days of Yehoshua, we have 2 different times to divide the land? But before we're going to speak about that, we're going to see the first verse in this chapter, which is also very important. It says, the whole community of Israel assembled at Shiloh, and set up the tent of meeting there. The land was now under their control. Only now, after 14 years, we say that the land was under their control. It looks like something important happened there. And what the important thing that happened there was establishing the Mishkan. Mishkan usually translated as tabernacle or tent in Shiloh. And Shiloh is maybe less famous from Beit HaMikdash, but it's almost as important as Beit HaMikdash in several aspects, halachic aspects and also others. So, as you know, when we have Beit HaMikdash, we do their sacrifice, korbanot. What's happened before they had the Beit HaMikdash? Did they have korbanot, sacrifice? Yes. Where? In the tabernacle, right? But in the Torah, we read that once we arrive to the final place, then we are not allowed to do sacrifice in other places in the land of Israel. Meaning that until then, it was allowed to make sacrifice in other places in the land of Israel. The Torah says, "Ki lo batem ad ata ela menucha ve'ela nachala." You didn't arrive until now to the menucha, to the rest, and to the nachala, to your inheritance. And Chachamim says, nachala zo Shiloh, menucha zo Yerushalayim. So there are some comparison between Shiloh and Yerushalayim. But let me maybe make an order. The tabernacle, the tent of glory, I want to say, the Oil Moed, right? The tent of meeting, Oil Moed, was placed in 4 different places during our history. First of all, it was in the desert from place to place, not in one specific place. After that, it was in the Gilgal during 14 years, these 14 years. After that, it was in Shiloh during 369 years. And after that, it was in another 2 places, in Nov and Givon. Yes, Nov and Givon. So according to the halacha, when the Mishkan was inside, when the Mishkan was in the desert, it was only allowed to do the sacrifice in the Mishkan. When the Mishkan was in Gilgal, it was allowed to make sacrifice everywhere. Everywhere in the land of Israel was a place where people could make their own personal worship and bring sacrifice to Hashem. The main public sacrifice were in the Mishkan, but each person that wanted to make any kind of sacrifice, he could do that anywhere he wanted. After that, during the time on Shiloh, it was allowed to do sacrifice only on Shiloh. And after that, when it was in Givon and Nov, it was allowed again everywhere. And after that, in Jerusalem, it was allowed only in Jerusalem. And from now on, it's only allowed in Jerusalem. So what we can see from that Shiloh is considered in its importance almost as Jerusalem. And there is another difference between Shiloh and the other places. All the other places that the Mishkan was made only by tent. It was like temporal. You can move it from place to place in few hours. But in Shiloh, it was built with stones. So in Shiloh, the building itself was with stones, and only the roof, the ceiling, was made by the tent. So it was, we can say, hybrid Mishkan, half of stones and half of tent. So what we can see is that Shiloh is considered almost as Jerusalem, in the meaning that when they arrived to the land of Israel, their stable place, where they are the permanent place of Beit HaMikdash, almost, the Beit HaMikdash was the same years almost as, the other way. The tent in Shiloh was almost the same time as it was the temple in Jerusalem. The temple in Jerusalem was around 400 years, and this was 369 years. And again, in the temple of Jerusalem, it was only allowed to sacrifice in the temple, and in Shiloh, it was only allowed to sacrifice in Shiloh. And Shiloh was made by stones, and also the temple was made by stones and not by tents. So we can see that Shiloh is considered half Beit Mikdash, almost Beit Mikdash. So we can say that when Am Yisrael gathered in Shiloh and put there the tent of the meeting, Ohel Moed, so we can say that they arrived to control the land. So controlling the land, again, it's not only taking the places like other nations. It puts the temple, the tent in this case. Once you arrive to have your permanent place to the tent, that means then they can say they control the land. Before they have the Kodesh, the holiness, the temple, they don't control the land. They maybe live there. They maybe, I don't know, make their industry and their agriculture, whatever. But you need the heart of everything. You need to arrive to put the heart, which is Beit Mikdash, which is a temple, and Shiloh is considered as a temple in this point. Anyway, once they arrive to Shiloh, we can say that all the technical part of getting the land under our control was made. And now Yehoshua is looking around and they see that the people still are not in the places. And like the verse says, but there remain 7 tribes of the Israelim that had not yet received the portion. So Yehoshua said to the Israelim, how long will you be slack about going? What is slack? Like lazy? Kalut rosh. You're not serious about that. Okay, it's like in Hebrew, they say use the word mitrapim. I would say you are too lazy to do that. So Yehoshua criticized Am Yisrael. Why? How long will you be slack about going and taking possession of the land that the Eternal, the God of your ancestors, was assigned to you? What's the problem of Yehoshua? It's his responsibility. He had to do that, no? And he already did that. We saw that he divided between the 9 tribes before. Let's continue reading. So it says, appoint 3 representatives from each tribe. I will send them out to go through the country and write down the description of it for purposes of apportionment, and then come back to me. They shall divide it into 7 parts. Yehudah shall remain by its territory in the south, and the house of Yosef shall remain by its territory in the north. When you have written down the description of the land in 7 parts, bring it here to me. Then I will cast lots for you here before the Eternal our God. So Yehoshua say, you should go, investigate the land, divide it to 7 parts, bring it to me, and then we will decide by lot. But again, a question. We already saw that they did the lot in chapter 14. So why to do that again? Oh, it's not again. It's the first time. So he did a lot only for the tribes of Yehudah and Yosef, and then another lot for the other tribes. And then he said, well, as we know, for the Leviim have no share among you, since God's priesthood is their portion, and Gad and Reuven and the half tribe of Menashe have received the portions that were assigned to them by Moshe, the servant of Hashem, on the eastern side of the Jordan. Anyway, the men set out on the journeys. Joshua ordered those who were living to write down the description of the land, go traverse the country and write down the description of it, then return to me, and I will cast lots of you here at Shiloh before Hashem. So the men went and traversed the land. They describe it in a document, town by town, in 7 parts, and they returned it to. I will answer just after reading that. Right? To return to the Joshua in the camp of Shiloh. Yehoshua cast lots for them at Shiloh before God, and there Yehoshua apportioned the land among the Israelim according to their divisions. Okay, so as I said before, it looks like something that was done before. Let's return now to chapter 13 for a second and chapter 14. It says that Hashem, in the beginning of chapter 13, it says Yehoshua was now old, advanced in years. Hashem said to him, you have grown old, you are advanced in years, and very much of the land still remains to be taken possession of. And there is a description of the land that there is to take possession of. And then in verse 7, it says, therefore, divide the territory into hereditary portions for the 9 tribes and the half tribes of Menashe. So the order that Yehoshua received from Hashem was to divide all the 9 parts, not only 2 parts like he did. If we now skip the rest of the chapter and go to chapter 14 in the beginning, it says, second, here. And these are the allotments of the Israelim in the land of Canaan that were apportioned to them by the priest Elazar HaKohen. Do you remember if he is mentioned in chapter 18 that we just read? It is not mentioned, it disappeared there. Over there, it's only Yehoshua. Where is Elazar? Here it's mentioned that Elazar was not only mentioned before Yehoshua, like we mentioned when we talked about it, when we learned it. So it was apportioned to them by the priest Elazar, by Yehoshua, son of Nun, and the family of heads of the Israelite tribe. And then it says, the portion that fell to them by lot, as God has commanded through Moses, for the 9.5 tribes. It looks like they already did the lot for the 9 tribes and a half. So we have several questions. Again, I will repeat the question very fast. It looks like the lot was made twice. Once in in chapter 14, and once in chapter 18. Why is it necessary to do it twice? The second is, where is Elazar HaKohen? Why is mentioned there and not mentioned here? The third, why Yehoshua is complaining about Am Israel? It was his job to do that. Hashem told him, you should divide the land by lot. Why he is accusing them of what he should have done? And I will remind you that Chazal were criticizing Yehoshua for not doing it on time. So now he is going against Am Israel. I will add another question that, even though it has other answers, but I just want to mention it. When we read the next parts of the land of Israel, right, Binyamin and Shimon and other tribes, we will see that there are some cities that were mentioned in the tribe of Yehuda, and in the second division, they are mentioned in the Nachala, in heritage of the tribe of Shimon. It's one case, so we talk about Shimon, but in the tribe of Binyamin, for example, Yerushalayim is mentioned. Okay, so I said there are several questions. I just want to mention it's not only Jerusalem, Kiryat Yarim. Now there are cities in the tribe of Dan, Zorah and Eshtaol, and there are several cities that appears once in the tribe of Yehuda and Ephraim, and other time in other tribes. So it looks like a contradiction. So I will give to this question one answer, 2 answers. First, the traditional, and second, quite new. When I say new, I mean to the 80s of the last century, but it's new when we are talking about learning Tanakh, right? Because it's 3,000 years. So a quite new answer that was written by Professor Eliyahu Assis. He was a Talmid Yeshiva in Eretz Zion. It's a very important, he's very famous in the area of Tanakh, of religious study of Tanakh, also academical, but also, it's okay. It's not something that it's there. Anyway, the traditional answer, we can say it's not exactly, but it's based on Abarbanel, Mitzuda David, and others that explain that there were actually two lots. In the first lot, it wasn't all the land of Israel. It only was the 2 tribes and a half. And if you look, again, we talked about how Yehoshua took the land. If you remember, we are coming from the east in the middle of the land, cutting the land for 2, then 1 war in the south, 1 war in the north. So Yehoshua in his wars, there are 2 wars here in the dividing of the parts, and gave up, so it wasn't necessary to continue. That's the way he divided. And then another 2 wars. In total, all the wars of Yehoshua that are mentioned in the Tanakh were 4. We suppose that there were other smallest, but smaller, but the biggest and the important were these 4 wars, where Yehoshua take the main part of the land. He doesn't enter to every village and every city. He take mainly the main part of the land of Israel. So these main parts are basically Yehuda and Menashe, Ephraim and Menashe, in the center of the land. And he didn't go to the corners, right, to all the other parts. So that was he was able to divide in the first place. And then it was the mission of the tribes to go and take the other places. That's why Yehoshua reclaiming them. You should have done that. You should have go and clear all the other parts of the land. But they didn't want. Why didn't they want? The Abarbanel, Metzudat David explains that they didn't want that each tribe will go alone. They wanted to go everybody together. So when you try to go everybody together, you know, this is the dentist, and the other was the appointment to the medic. I don't know, and the other one is father of Shabbat in the kindergarten. I don't know. So everybody has his excuses, and he can't. I mean, it wasn't possible that everybody. So we have Yehuda and the Ephraim that were very brave, and they're very big and strong, and they went by themselves, and they could clear all the land that was belonged to them. And they did what they had to do. We also different when we read about the division or the part of Yehuda and Yosef, we see personal stories. The story of Caleb, the story of Othniel, the daughter of Tzlofchad. We can see that the people has this passion about taking the land of Israel. So it's go until to the individuals of the tribes. So they did the mission, but the other tribes weren't so passionate about doing that each one alone. So they wanted to do everything together. So they just stayed in the places. We can say that they had enough food because they had a lot of flocks, a lot of sheep and goats. They had a lot of places to live because there were cities that were clear from the inhabitants. So they weren't in a rush. They were okay like that. And a year passed, and another year passed, another year passed, and 7 years passed. And Yehoshua is looking around, and you see, we already have our tent of meeting in this place for the next hundreds of years. We are okay with what you are living, but you still don't do what you have to do. So now I'm going to obligate you, and then he sent, and then he did the second lot. This is the first explanation. Like I said, the more traditional explanation. The second explanation, which is interesting, I'm not sure it's true, but it's interesting. It says that there was 2 lots. The first lot, it's similar in some aspect of what I said before, but it's a little bit different. The first lot was for all the 9 tribes. All the 12 tribes, those who received in the other part, and in the first lot, everybody received his part generally. It wasn't necessary to send people to investigate. Everybody received his part. And then, again, the national mission became mission of a tribe. And the tribes should have gone and take their parts, each one of them. But they didn't, like we said before. They didn't because they wanted to go everybody together, maybe because they were too lazy, or maybe because they were comfortable with where they are. And Yehoshua saw that they didn't take their parts, so he did another second lot. According to that, the second lot wasn't identified to the first one. The second lot wasn't with Elazar HaKohen, it wasn't with Urim Vetumim. It was according to what was possible. We can say there is an ideal, the idea, the perfect thing that we want to aspire. That was the first division. What Hashem wanted to be, or the lot of the Urim Vetumim, which is Ruach HaKodesh, decided. And then, yes, there are the reality. The reality is that you cannot live in all the land of Israel because there are Knaanim. And as we saw, what? Yes, so that would be the aspiration. We want to arrive to that.
But we saw in the past that when we will be exactly happened the same.
No, the Urim Tumim can tell you the future, and the Urim Tumim can tell you what to do. But it's not necessarily the same thing. When they told you what to do, you can disobey. It's a sin. It's not a good thing. That's why Yehoshua is angry. You were told to go and take, for example, we will see the most extreme case is Shevet Dan. Shevet Dan, as we mentioned several times, is here.
Yeah.
But he never lived there because he couldn't take the cities. So he went to the north and found another part here in the north, in the far north. Right? That's why you have in Israel the zone of Tel Aviv, it's called Gush Dan, because that was the original part of Dan. And in the north, there is Nachal Dan, right? And other places that called Dan in the north, because Shevet Dan couldn't take his place and should have gone to the north. So we can see that there is an ideal, what we want to, what we aspire, but it's not necessarily happens the way we want. So then there is another division. And another division, Yehuda has to contribute some part of his cities, and maybe it's not exactly the same as it should have done, and it's according to what is possible to go. That's why you need to investigate. Why did Yehoshua send the people to investigate the land? To see where it's possible, where it's actual places that these tribes can live in. So now it was necessary to check exactly the places. Okay, so according to this explanation, there was two different lots. The first lot after 7 years, and the second lot after 14 years, when they actually divided according to what was possible in that moment. And then they had to continue to do their missions, which didn't happen, as we're going to see, B'ezrat Hashem, in the beginning of Sefer Shoftim. In the first chapter of Sefer Shoftim, it again speaks about each tribe go to take his nachala, his inheritance. And so they didn't do that here. No, they didn't. They never finish this mission. This was ongoing mission that was never finished. Whoa, and that was, like we said, the seed of the problem, the seed of the destruction of the temple was because they couldn't finish the mission in the times of Yehoshua. Sometimes the destruction takes many generations, but it's the root of it, the source of it was that they weren't able to complete the mission of each tribe taking his part in the land of Israel. So anyway, returning to our chapter, we saw that the big wars were over. The Mishkan was established in its permanent place at least until we have Jerusalem, many years later. And then Yehoshua divided the rest of the land. Like I said before, these chapters are a little bit more, I don't want to say boring, but hard to learn with interest, because it's like a long list of places and cities, but still there are some interesting things. And at least we're going to see three special cases: Binyamin, Shimon, and Dan. So we'll start now with Binyamin. So the lot of the tribe of the Binyamin by the clans came out first. Why first Binyamin? It's strange because Binyamin is the youngest. I mean, any way that you want to see it, it looks like Binyamin is not placed in his place. In the Tanakh, we can see there are different ways that the Torah describes the tribes. Sometimes it's according to the order of their birth. So it starts Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda. Sometimes it's according to the way they were around the Mishkan. So we have the Yehuda, and then Issachar and Zvulun. And then, I mean, according to the, it was, around the Mishkan, there was 4 groups of 3. So sometimes it's according to that. For example, when they send the spies to the land of Israel, there is an order. Anyway, in no of the orders, Binyamin is the third, or the first between. I mean, if we have Yehuda, Ephraim, Menashe, Reuven, Gad, Binyamin shouldn't be the first. Also, if we go according to the way the land of Israel was divided, so it should have been, usually it's from the south to the north, it should have been Shimon, and then Binyamin, or Shimon, Binyamin, Dan. Anyway, Binyamin is the youngest, it's not in his place. It looks like, why Binyamin is the first one? Okay, yeah, we will see that, we will see that. Also, why is it there? Why Binyamin is in the middle? Like, look in the heart of Eretz Israel.
Maybe
It's the
Yaakov
main
said
part.
they say bracha. We need to check what Yaakov said in bracha.
Yeah, we'll see about the bracha of Yaakov also. And well, I'm just starting with the questions. The answer we're going to see later. So a lot of the tribe of the Binyamin by the clans came out first. The territories that fell onto the lot between the Yehuda and the Yosefim. Binyamin is interesting. It's between Yehuda and Yosef. You remember other times that Binyamin was between Yehuda and Yosef when they fought about Binyamin, right? Anyway, let's continue. Ephraim is Yosef, and Yosef and Yehuda were fighting over Binyamin when they came. Yehuda came to defend Binyamin. Yosef wanted to leave Binyamin with him. It was a serious intention. It wasn't a intention. It's another question. But they were fought on Binyamin, and finally Binyamin is between them, and they're going to fight on him for a long time. Okay, the boundary on the northern rim began at the Jordan. The boundary ascended to the northern flank of Jericho, ascended westward into the hill country and down to the wilderness of Bet Even. You can see these places here, I think. You can see more or less. From there, the boundary passed on southward to Luz, to the flank of Luz, that is Bet El. Then the boundary ascended to Atarot Adar, and to the hill south of lower Bet Horon. The boundary now turned and carved onto the western rim. This boundary has its own life, right? Is ascending, is downing, is curved. It looks like it's a very live entity, right? And carved onto the west, we talk about that. And the boundary ran southward from the hill on the south side of Bet Horon, till it ended at Kiryat Baal, that is Kiryat Yarim, town of the Yehuda. It says here clearly that Kiryat Yarim belongs to Yehuda. So we can say that the Gvul passed there. After that, we'll see that it's the city of Kiryat Yarim is mentioned also in between the cities of Binyamin. A town of the Yehudim, that was the western rim. The southern rim, from the outskirts of Kiryat Yarim, the boundary passed westward and ran on to the fountain of the waters of Naftoach. Yeah. Then the boundary descended to the foot of the hill by the valley of Ben Hinnom, at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. Yeah, it's Emek Rephaim. It's in Jerusalem. Then it ran down to the valley of Hinnom along the southern flank of the Yevusim to En Rogel. Carving northward, it ran on to En Shemesh and round on to Glilot, facing the ascent of Edumim, Male Edumim, and descended to the stone of Bohan, son of Reuven, so meaning in the east. It continued northward to the edge of Arava and descended into the Arava. The boundary passed on the northern flank of Bet Hogla, and the boundary ended at the northern tongue of the Dead Sea, at the southern end of the Yarden. Then was southern boundary. On the eastern rim, finally, the Yarden was the boundary that was a portion of Binyamin by the clans according to his boundaries on all sides. And now it says the cities, like it was in the case of Ephraim and Menashe and Yehuda. And the towns of the tribe of Binyamin by its clans were Yericho, Bet Hogla. Yericho also was, well, Yericho itself wasn't allowed to live there. But it all was given to the sons of Yitro. We will see that the sons of Yitro also lived in Yericho. And well, Bet Hogla, Emek Kaziz, Bet Arava, Samarim, Bet El, Avim, Para, Ofra, Kfar Amona, Ofni, and Geva, 12 towns with the villages. Also Givon, Rama, Be'erot. These cities, Givon and Be'erot, belongs to the Givonim, if you remember, this nation. So it belongs to Givonim or to Binyamin. The relationship between the Givonim and Binyamin will continue until the day of Shaul. And it wasn't such a nice relationship. Mitzpah, Kfira, Motza, Rekem, Irpe'el, Tarla, Tzela, Elef, and Yevus, that is Jerusalem. Givat and Kiryat Yarim. Arim, it says. Yes, so it looks like the same place, right? 14,000 towns with villages, that was a portion of the Binyamin by the clans. Okay, so again, we won't see all these places. Like I said before, there are some cities that it look like they appeared twice. And like we mentioned before, there are special things about Binyamin. First of all, that it was first. Second of all, we can see, I won't read now because we already read a lot, but when we read about the other tribes, it doesn't describe like that. The description is much shorter. The names of the city are not mentioned. That means that Binyamin is described the same way that Ephraim, that Yosef and Yehuda were described, not as the same way as the other tribes. So in some way, it belongs to them, right? All the details and also the border is described in other tribes in less vivid way. It doesn't say it ascended, it descended, it goes there, it goes there. No, it just say the gvul was these places. It doesn't say that it's go. It looks like the gvul, the boundary of the other places was not so close. It wasn't so well established. It was like more or less vague, you say? Vague, like a vague. Yeah, you write it vague. That's what I. Sometimes I know the words as the way they're written.
English is crazy.
Okay, so it was like it's more vague. The boundary goes in these places. It doesn't say that it's ascended, descended. So Binyamin, in some meaning, belongs to the league of the big, right? It belongs to Ephraim and to Yosef and Yehuda, and not to the other tribes. And that's the reason is in the middle, is in the heart of the land of Israel. So Jerusalem belongs to whom? So it was divided between Binyamin and Yehuda. The Gemara described how it was, most of it was belongs to Binyamin, and then there is a part that was from Yehuda that was there. And again, I will mention another something that is interesting. Always the Bet Mikdash or the tent of meeting, or Moed, is in the Nachala of Binyamin. Gilgal is in Binyamin, Givon is Binyamin, Nov is Binyamin, Shiloh, that we said before that is the most important between the places, also belongs to Binyamin and Ephraim. It's between Binyamin and Ephraim. It belongs to two places.
According to the map,
No, so I don't think it's very, it's not very exact. And Shiloh belongs onto also, it says once that it belongs to Binyamin, once it belongs to Ephraim. So we can see that always the Bet Mikdash is in the Nachala of Binyamin. What was the merit of Binyamin? That he had always Bet Mikdash, or tent of the meeting, inside his Nachala. Binyamin has also dark side, let's say, dark side. We will see that in the end of Sefer Shoftim. It was almost terminated, as you say, destroyed, totally destroyed, in the case of Pilegesh Bagivah. So he has also a problematic side. But mainly we can see that Binyamin is in the center of of the land, the center of Am Yisrael. In some meaning, the reason that what were the two tribes that survived the Galut? Yehuda and Binyamin. In the division of the land of Israel between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Binyamin was with Yehuda. It was Yehuda and Binyamin against all the rest. Even though that Binyamin is a son of Rachel, he should have been with Ephraim, which was a leader of the rest of Am Yisrael. But he stayed with Yehuda.
Because Yehuda promised to Yaakov.
Yeah, Yehuda promised Yaakov to keep Binyamin. Anyway, it sticked with Yehuda. So Chachamim, when they speak about Binyamin, they give some reason for that, that I think each one of them is very important. First of all, Binyamin was the only son of Yaakov that was born in the land of Israel, right? If you remember, all the tribes were born when Yaakov was in Haran. The only one that was born in the land of Israel was Yosef. He was born in Bethlehem when Rachel passed away in this case. But Bethlehem is near Jerusalem, and he was born there. Bethlehem belongs to Yehuda, but Binyamin was born there. So that's one reason that the Midrash said. Why always the Bet Mikdash, the Nachala, the tent of meeting is in the land of Binyamin? Because he was the only one who was born in the land of Israel. There is some big merit of being born, or how do you say, likaver,
Or buried.
or buried, born and buried in the land of Israel. You know that during the Galut, people used to send the children, send the parents to live the last years in the land of Israel and then to be buried there. There's something that is important because they say they don't have to go through Gilgul Mechilot. Do you remember? We talked about Gilgul Mechilot once? I don't remember if it was here. No. Anyway, Gilgul Mechilot is according to Kabbalah, I don't know, Midrashim, legends that we have, that when it's going to be Tchiyat HaMetim, the dead are going to get alive, so they have to go everybody to the land of Israel. But if they are buried outside the land of Israel, they will go through tunnels, subterranean tunnels to the land of Israel, which is some kind of suffering before being able to revive, right? So it's like a thing that you save from yourself if you are buried in the land of Israel. So it says that it's better to be buried in the land of Israel. Of course, all of this is symbolic and it means something about what your soul has to pass in order to be live again in the land of Israel. Anyway, Binyamin was the only tribe that was born in the land of Israel, which gave him a special holiness, special Kedusha, for being, so that's the reason he is in the center of the land of Israel. That's the reason that Bet Mikdash is in his part. The second reason that Chachamim gives is that he was the only one that didn't participate in the selling of Yosef. All the tribes were participating in the selling of Yosef in some way or another. So this is not very exact because Reuven didn't want to sell him. It's quite clear that Reuven, when we read the story about selling of Yosef, so Yosef came close to the brothers, they saw him from far away, so they say in the beginning, let's kill him. According to Chachamim, it was Levi and Shimon that said, let's kill him. And then they said, Reuven told them, don't do that, don't kill him by yourself, let's put him in the well, and he will die by himself, don't kill him by himself. And then after that, they sit to eat, and it looks like Reuven went away. I will explain why it looks like that. He doesn't say, but it looks like that. And then Yehuda say, you know what, why should we leave him dead here? Let's sell him, at least we get something. So there are Levi and Shimon that wants to kill him, Yehuda that wants to sell him. And then they said, the Torah says that Reuven came back and saw that it's not in the well. And he say, oh, what we did, now what I would say to my father. So we can see that what Reuven didn't participate in the sale. He didn't know that it was sold. So as the Torah said, yeah, okay. Now I'm focusing about selling Yosef. So it says, the Torah said by itself that his intention was to return him to his father. So Reuven didn't participate in the sale, but he didn't in the selling of Yosef. He didn't prevent it. And the others were even worse. They wanted to kill him or to sell him, or they did sell him eventually. So we can see that each one of the brothers took part in some way of the selling of Yosef. The only one that didn't do that was Binyamin. And it's not only the technical issue, details that he didn't sell him. It's also the idea. He was, and I will say also, Yosef didn't sell Yosef also, right? So maybe it should have been in his part. Yeah, but he was part of the machloket. Yosef was part of the machloket. If it was his fault, of course, he didn't deserve to be sold. Nobody's deserved to be sold. But he had part of the machloket. The Torah said that he tells the dreams and that Yosef edibatam ra'el he spoke badly about the brothers with his father. So Yosef had part. He wasn't the big sinner in this case, of course. He was sold, he didn't sell, but he was part of the machloket. Binyamin is the one who is not under machloket. He is not part of the discussion. He's not part of the disagreement. And we can see that Yehuda works for him and Yosef wants him because he's the one who, you know, there's always this guy that never has fight with anyone. He's okay with everybody. There is a big machloket in the synagogue, but he is keeping peace with everybody. So this is Binyamin. He is the source of the union of Am Yisrael. And that's the reason that the place of Bet HaMikdash that should be common between everyone, right, shared with everyone, it's in the place of Binyamin, part of Yehuda, but also in Binyamin, because Yerushalayim, also the Gemara say, Lo chulka leshvatim. So we have third opinion. We see Yerushalayim in Binyamin, Yehuda, or nowhere. So the halacha is finally that no tribe received part in Jerusalem. It was to all the tribes. Yerushalayim, העיר שחוברה לה יחדיו. ששם מלאו שבטים שבטיה עדות לישראל. ירושלים is a city, חוברה לה יחדיו is uniting all the tribes. All the tribes ascended to Jerusalem to בית המקדש. Yeah, Jerusalem GC, not part of the federation. Okay, so according to this is the second reason the Chachamim said. Like I said before, the first reason he was the one who was born in Jerusalem, in Israel. The second reason he was the one that represents the union of Am Yisrael. He wasn't part of the discussion of the Machloket, and that why Jerusalem can be, or the Bet Mikdash, the tent can be in his part. There are other explanations. One of them that he doesn't have sources in the Talmud or in the Psukim, in the verses, but the Midrash mentioned that he was maybe the most modest. Like the Midrash give a story, like a father that has many kids, and he wants to stay with one of them. So they start speaking where he would stay, and the smallest, the youngest, he put down his head, looked down, and he was, well, I'm the smallest, I won't be the one who receives that. So the father saw that and said, you know what, I'm going to be with you, because you are the most modest. So we can see some kind of modesty that Binyamin had. Also, other Midrash say that when all the tribes left the house and got married, and so who stayed to take care of father Yaakov? Binyamin. So he was one of Kibud Orim. You know that the big merit of Esav was his Kibud Orim with Yitzchak. When Yaakov left the house, Esav was taking care of Yaakov, of Yitzchak. So the same way, or even better, Binyamin was the one who stayed at home to take care of his father. So this Kibud Orim was the reason why he received all that. Anyway, this is about the Nachala of Binyamin. Like we said before, it looks like Binyamin is the first because of his importance, and the way he's described, he described like the Yodah and Ephraim and Menashe, Yodah and Yosef, because he was, let's say, in this scale, in this level. He was one of the most important tribes, and this is the reason the Beit Mikdash in his part, the Nachala, the Ol Moed is in part, and that is in the middle of the land of Israel. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very interesting.